All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. You had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. Um, I I want to welcome everyone to a new outlook of we're trying to up our presentations a little bit. So this is the first one with all these bells and whistles, and very excited about it. I appreciate all the hard work um, from the team on this. We'll see if this will be something we do going forward, and we'll let you know. But anyway, welcome everyone to today's fifth webinar in our five-part series called International Logistics. You will recognize the smiling face of our speaker today from the wonderful articles he writes in our monthly newsletters, Mr. Colton Rook. My name is Jonathan Bricker, and I am the chair of the Arkansas District Export Council. In my primary role, I work for Regions Bank, located in Rogers, Arkansas, and I'm a commercial relationship manager. I want to begin today by thanking our sponsors, Arkansas Manufacturing Solutions and Arkansas Workforce Connections. Their yearly sponsorship and partnership throughout the year are what makes our webinars so successful. I really appreciate you all joining us today. For those that are joining for the first time, you're not quite sure who the deck is and what we do, allow me to do a quick introduction. We're a private, nonprofit organization that brings together experienced international business people with potential exporters. We have a ton of experience within our council and in many different sectors. Now, having said that, we don't know all the answers, but we can introduce you to someone who does. We are a community of connections within the exporting world, and we want to be your strategic partner and help you grow your bottom line. My hope for the day is that you walk away from this webinar with a little bit more confidence in your exporting abilities. If you have any questions throughout the webinar and you don't feel comfortable asking it here, I invite you to reach out to us on our website, exportarkansas.org, and we'll have one of our members reach out to you. There, you can also sign up for that monthly newsletter I was talking about, which is chock full of pertinent international news and trade show opportunities. Colton's Corner is the part that Colton writes, and it's become a real hit with our readers. These classes are designed to generate questions as you work through what it takes to successfully send your product or service overseas. They're meant to be a very high-level overview on some very important parts of becoming exporters. Then, as you're ready to take that next step or jump right in, the deck will be there to help in any way possible. Basically, we want to help you grow your bottom line and help create jobs for your new for your company. Before we begin, I'd like to ask everyone to keep themselves muted and raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question or simply put it in the chat. That way we don't have any background noise interrupting our speakers. I'd like to introduce everyone to your moderator today, Mr. Rudy Ortiz. Rudy is the owner of Strategic Business Services, LLC, where he helps companies with a wide variety of international business and exporting needs. He is a part of the U.S. Partner of Global Market Entry Consultants, which is a group of experts located in 32 different countries. He has an MBA in international business and is a certified global business professional. And for these reasons, he's the DEX Education Chair. Rudy, thanks so much for all you do. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Jonathan, thank you so much again. I appreciate that. So as it turns out, there's a lot of things that you can do, a lot of mistakes that you can make in business, but in terms of international business, logistics is something that you really got to get right. And because if you don't, it can really cause some very serious and expensive problems. As it turns out today, the young man that we're having speak to us, Colton Rook, is the business development manager for a logistics company called V. Alexander and Company. I call him Alexander, and a major player in the logistics field. And as it turns out, Colton has been working with the deck now for at least a couple of years, maybe closer to three, and he's been a real asset to us. Very, very knowledgeable person, and really knows his business. And so, if we can go to his slide, I'd like to be able to introduce him. There we go. Okay, so once again, Colton Rook and he's a native of Arkansas and lives in the Pine Bluff area. He's been involved with logistics for about 10 years. Once again, he's writing our newsletter, which has lots of great information. And if you're not currently getting the newsletter from the deck, which also contains the information from Colton, I would really suggest that you ask Miss Heidi to get that for you so that you can be receiving it on an ongoing basis. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Colton. Thank you so much.
Yep, Rudy, thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to these types of webinars. Like Rudy mentioned, I've been with the Arkansas Export Council for about 3 years now in contributing to the newsletters, but it's always great to be able to give back to the state that I'm from. I'm originally from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and career opportunities have taken me around the country, and I've landed in Memphis, so I'm not too far. But as Rudy said, this webinar is really great, really geared toward getting people who are hesitant to begin taking international orders or to begin truly exploring international markets, which is a great business opportunity and a great market that U.S. companies uh, need to explore. And I say need to explore because if COVID has taught us anything, number one, it would be diversification of your supply chain. And then number two, you can't rely just on US markets, right? Because, when you talk about growing markets like Australia, Brazil, India, Canada, these are all great markets that for your businesses can generate additional cash flow, right? But the caveat is how does a business expand internationally? And what we find in talking with business owners is number one, doing the market research and, how can you sell overseas? But then number two, I don't even know where to begin. And the goal of this webinar is to hopefully get you a little more comfortable. And as Jonathan said, if you have questions or if you have concerns and you don't want to put them in the chat, by all means, utilize the Arkansas Export Council and its resources. But then also, please, at any point, reach out to me. I've had several conversations with several businesses in Arkansas who, again, they have these webinars, they have further questions, and we're always happy to have that conversation. Fun fact, I'm actually in Baton Rouge, Louisiana right now on business, and every billboard is a Lane Kiffin billboard. It's comical at this point. But that being said, Jonathan, the Razorbacks did poach the coach from Memphis, so we're all having a rough time here.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
We'll see. We'll see. Fantastic. So we'll get straight into it. So the goal of this really is to help everybody here understand, the ins and outs of exporting, not in granular detail, but from a 30,000 level foot view. In terms of selecting your mode of transportation, identifying your needed resources, understanding what some things that need to be considered from a compliance standpoint, such as your documentation and certifications, and then the risk that is involved with transportation internationally. So again, our agenda is just there's our agenda. We'll go straight into it. So logistics is defined as the movement of goods and of money and information and goods. As you understand the modes of transport and the movement of goods, that's going to help you develop in your program, right? Not just the movement of information, such as your idea, but the movement of the product, be it sourcing from overseas or sourcing from domestically. How does that get to your warehouse? And then as you sell overseas, how does the movement of money go, right? In terms of credit and collections and things of that nature. So as you build out your international program for the export side, this is sort of a flow chart that we've created to help you understand, right? Once you have a plan of how to sell your product, you can't just start selling internationally. You have to factor in the time frames of what it means to source internationally, if you source internationally. How do you plan to sell it? Where are you going to source it from? How are you going to get it in? How are you going to make it? How are you going to sell it via e-commerce, via trade shows, however that may be? How are you going to fulfill it? How are you going to ship it? And then what levels of service are you going to need? Are you going to show, right? Different selling internationally is not just cut and dry of how do I ship it? It's all going to be when do you need to fulfill it to your customers? What expectations are you going to set to your international customers to be able to get it to their door? And if you do things of such as if you're selling like a service or renting equipment, let's say, how are you going to then return that product to you on, say, like a temporary export basis, which is a whole nother topic we can get into. So really, to simplify your logistics program can be broken down into this chart of what is going to be how you want to structure, right? Because as you ship, it does come back on your business reputation. We all know when we order stuff from online or we order stuff from Amazon or we order stuff from Walmart or wherever the case may be, how it is shipped to us does not reflect necessarily on the carrier. It will reflect on that business, right? In the case of Walmart, it reflects on Walmart. If I order from this is a Johnny O polo that I ordered. If this had a bad service, I don't blame the USPS or FedEx or UPS. I blame Johnny O for choosing the poor carrier, right? So when you're choosing a carrier or a mode of transport to get it overseas, you need to factor in what is the risk to my reputation. Are you going to manage this in-house? Are you going to go to a third party? Are you going to go to a freight forwarder? Are you going to choose a freight forwarder versus an integrated carrier? Are you going to use a mixture? What is your customer service going to look like? What is going to be my default mode of choice for transportation? Are you predominantly going to do ocean, air, consolidations, truck freight, LTL, things of that nature? What countries am I going to sell to? What markets do I want to sell to? Do I want to sell to, we call them the crown countries, right? The UK, Scotland, Australia, New Zealand, or am I going to sell in the EU? Am I going to try and break into a new market such as Southeast Asia? What visibility can I offer my customers? And then, of course, how does all of this affect my bottom line to then pass on to the customer, right? How do I keep my cost competitive while offering the best mode of service and visibility to my clients? So your different modes of transportation that you are going to run into and that you will want to consider depending on where it's going can be really broken down into four categories: truck and rail, ocean, air, and then of course multimodal, which is a multifaceted approach. For example, if you're going to Canada, it may be best just to go via standard ground or via LTL or full truckload. Very, very few people will do a rail type car for unless you're doing chemicals or food products or things like that. Ocean, you can go anywhere from port to port, port to door, full container, less than container. You can do consolidations. Again, multifaceted approach. Air, you've got that with all of its air, door to door, door to airport, airport to door, into the end consumer's door with a drop ship. Those are options. And then again, multimodal using any combination, again, based on your needs, your fulfillment, and your budget for your costing. So when you're looking at the different ways to get your product out of the US, when you do go to a provider, be it a freight forwarder, a 3PL, or an integrated carrier, one of the most important things you're going to want to do is state how you or the different modes of transportation that you want, right? And a good scenario may be, let's say you're sending a bulk order of, I'm going to say widgets for simplicity. You're sending a bulk order of widgets to Australia. One of the best things you can do when getting a quote is again have your weight, DIMS, and all the details of the cargo. And then if you have concerns over transit, tell the service provider, hey, I would like to have an in-house date of this at my customer's door, or my customer would like an in-house date. I would like this off my dock at this date with a transit time, right? Some people have concerns over certain airports. If you have a client, let's say in France, and more than likely it's either going to go through Charles de Gaulle or in some cases you can go through Heathrow Airport if you're flying it over there. Heathrow has a lot of issues. So if you have concerns or if you see something on the news or in one of our articles that a certain port, a certain airport or route has issues or you have concerns over it, you will want to state that you want to know, like, hey, I want to avoid that if it's possible, if I'm even going through that. But you do need to ask yourself, what don't I know? If I know my costs, I know my transit, what else don't I know? Do I not know any potential duties and taxes depending on your Incoterm you're going to sell under, which we'll get to that later. Multiple quotes are going to make sure you're number one getting the best cost, but then, or I'm sorry, the best rate, but then to let you know what options are out there versus, oh, just get it from A to B. The standard's 5 to 7 days on a standard route. So getting creative in how you get your cargo off your dock and into somebody's warehouse or to their door overseas is going to separate you from somebody that just may say our standard transit is on international 7 to 10 days for air, 3 to 5 weeks on ocean, take it or leave it, because you can offer multiple options to your client. The other piece is, like I said, if you have delivery commitments and you are publishing that on your website or in your purchase order or your invoice you are sending that to the client, make sure your carrier or your service provider can meet those deadlines by communicating that on the front end. There we go. So then you have to factor in, once you get quotes, then you're going to factor in your cost of choices. Meaning you've got your product, you've got your terms and your movement and your landing costs. All of these affect it, right? You've got your products, which of course is going to be your value, because you have to take into consideration, depending on the Incoterm you sell under, which again, we'll talk later, who's going to be responsible for duties and taxes? How does the value of your product affect the landed duties and taxes? What competition is overseas? What is the shelf life of your product? Is there a seasonality? Like, for example, if you are sending chocolate to Australia right now, you could ship chocolate in the US because I'm here in Louisiana, it's 45 degrees. You could probably ship chocolate via air and it not melt, but it's summer in Australia right now. You're going to want to take into consideration, what are my packing needs? Do I need dry ice? Do I need the extra padding for the additional legs of transit to keep the integrity of my product? Your terms. Again, goes back to your Incoterms. Who's paying for the duties and taxes? Who's paying for the freight? What are the destination countries' duty and tax rates on my product? Are there tariffs on my product? And in some cases, certain commodities can have limited quantities. That may affect, if your customer orders over the limited quantity, you're going to have to make two shipments in order to get it into the destination country potentially. So these are all things that need to be considered before you start even selling in the other country, before you fulfill those orders. The movement, again, it goes back to what is going to be your mode of transportation. How quick are you going to want it to arrive to their door to fulfill your customers' orders? And then, of course, are there going to be any limited quantities you sell? Like you have to sell 10 units before you ship internationally? Or is there going to be a max? Like international orders cannot be more than 100 units because we cannot fulfill that, right? Whatever the cost is going to be. All of these will affect your landed cost that you're going to have to quote properly in order to, again, make a profit when you start selling internationally. So once you've chosen your mode of transportation, you know how it's going to be fulfilled. Now comes the piece that really stick people, and that's going to be the export documentation. Because when you export outside, Puerto Rico is still considered a U.S. territory, even though it's not a state, but you don't need any international documentation to go to Puerto Rico. In Canada, it's very, very limited to U.S. territories or U.S. military bases, even though those are quote unquote international. You do not need international documentation to go to those countries. But if you go to Thailand, you're going to need an international airway bill if you go via air. You always need to send a commercial invoice. A commercial invoice, the best way I can describe it is that is your international passport for that cargo. No carrier, nobody will touch it if you try and send it without a commercial invoice. It will sit on that dock until you have it. In some cases, you may need to file what's called an electronic export information filing, or an EEI. You may have to show a certificate of origin if you sell into Canada to take advantage of the NAFTA or the USMCA law. You're gonna need a bill of lading. Certain cases you need export declaration. You're going to want to send a packing list. In some cases, depending on the terms and the payments, you may need to do a letter of credit. In some cases, some forwarders like myself, depending on the terms of sale and the value, sometimes we will ask for a letter of credit to protect ourselves from liability and to protect you as well. The information needed for this, you're just going to need who's going to need to act as the importer of record. That all goes back to the terms. And these are negotiations that probably need to be had on the front end before you sell the product. A full commodity description. The better you describe that product, the better it's going to probably move through customs in, again, Thailand, Australia, India, because you have to look at it from their perspective. You know your product better than anybody. People on the other side of the world who are in customs do not know your product. So they need to be able to look at that paperwork to say, okay, these are widgets. What are they made of? What's the quantity? What's their end use? That will generally answer 99% of the questions they have, unless, again, you say that part of the widgets come from the US and part of the widgets come from, let's just say, Saudi Arabia. That may raise some red flags. Or it may just general questions of, hey, we need a breakdown, right? But if you describe it in detail and to your best ability, that will clear up about 99% of your issues going overseas and clearing customs. Your harmonized tariff schedule code, This is a 10-digit code that is assigned to all commodities. Our phones have it, our computers have it, my binder for my notes have it. That can easily be looked up on the government website. We have a link at the end of the slideshow having that. Always have a licensed customs broker double check that. It's always a good rule of thumb because we are certified in doing that, and we can tell you if it's wrong, if it's accurate, or hey, that code no longer exists, because sometimes codes will change and they don't exist, and the website has failed to be updated in some cases. Your terms of sale, clearly state your terms of sale, meaning is it going to be DDP, DAP, FOB? Again, these Incoterms that you need to understand where your liability ends and begins, and the same for your client. It also will lay out who's responsible for what in the transportation of said cargo. And that also encompasses, who's going to be paying for duty, who's going to be paying for the duties and taxes.
Hey, Colton, we have a question in the chat. I don't know if you want me to wait to the end or go ahead and do that now.
For the sake of time, Jonathan, we may wait till the end
Sure.
if that's good with everybody.
Yep,
I want to
that'll
make I
work.
just want to make sure we keep our flow.
All right, sounds
But
good.
thank you for letting me know. So again, going back to export documentation, we just have some examples of bad descriptions versus good descriptions. This is a great resource. You can say that even though, again, let's say you sell wood screws, putting samples, I can I can tell you that would get held immediately because it doesn't tell me what the product is. Wood screws, samples, fantastic. Parts won't work. Guide parts for printing press. You can see these 1 or 2 word examples or just part numbers don't do a good job. These typically will get held. Like I said, on the right hand side, you can see the better you describe it. That is what customs in the US, in the UK, in India, in Australia, in New Zealand. This is what they want to look for because they want to know before they even have to open the box to do an inspection. They just want to see what it is to make sure that your product again doesn't contain anything hazardous, is not a banned commodity, or doesn't require special paperwork. So commodity classification, this all goes back to that HTS code. So there's a multi-purpose international goods classification system, which is that HTS code website we have linked, that you're gonna need your harmonized tariff code. It's called an HTS code, a harmonized tariff schedule number, a Schedule B. It goes by different names, but they're universal in that if you can find that number and send it with the shipment, so you're gonna have your description, you're gonna have the classification, and therefore in a customs agent knowing what the commodity is going to clear a lot of questions and make your life a lot easier and make you look better because if I order from ABC Company in Arkansas, I know that their stuff doesn't get held because they do such a good job in describing the product, right? That's something that you can tell that we have a very robust international program, very few holds, right? That may even be something that you can track to put on your website or to brag about when you sell overseas. But again, as you look up for classification for your commodities, it's free knowledge. You can look at it on the website. However, always have a licensed broker of some sort double check that code just to make sure it's right. That way you can have a seal of approval to say, hey, it is right, we're good to go. So we'll talk about the EEI filing. So the electronic export information filing, also called an EEI or an AES, is required for all commodities leaving the US going to a foreign country outside of Canada and Mexico where the declared value is over 2,500 US dollars. So if you have a commodity that's $1,000, you do not need to file an EEI. And this is across all modes of transportation. That means that if you are selling something overseas for $2,501, by law, you must file an EEI. It can result in a fine from the US government. I say it can because you have to take the gamble of if they're going to audit you or not. They do audit you, it's about a $500 fine per day that the EEI has been missed with a cap of, I believe they changed it recently. I believe a cap of 90 days or 120. I'll verify that and get that back. But anything over $2,500, anything that requires a BIS license, or that is subject to ITAR regulations, and we're going to get into what ITAR is here momentarily, or that requires Department of State licensing. So if you do military contracts, you're going to want to file an EEI. Most people can do a self-filing EEI. I personally don't recommend that because errors can be made and certain classifications need to be put. So if you have a cert, like I know FedEx does it for their clients, DHL, UPS, the integrated carriers normally should help you do that. Freight forwarders such as myself and customs brokers, we will do EEI filings for our customers on their behalf as well. There is another piece that isn't talked about a lot, and that is you can do a pre-departure or a post-departure EEI filing. Pre-departure means you file the EEI prior to it ever leaving your dock. Post-departure means you will file it at some point after it leaves. You can probably take a guess of which one I'm not a fan of, and that's the post-departure because, you know, for myself, if I'm running a business and have a four and have I've got a little 4-year-old daughter myself and I've got my day job, I'm going to forget to file that EEI at some point, and then I may result in some fines. So as you grow your business, as you see these post-departure filings as an option, I would encourage you to avoid those at all costs, unless there's information that you're missing that you need to get, but the cargo needs to leave by a certain time to make a flight or make a cutoff at the port.
The other thing about that, Colton, is that if you wait until the end and you don't know that something changed, that could really screw up the works. And so trying to do it beforehand and finding out whether there's any new changes or any new information that you need is definitely the way to go.
Thank you, Rudy. So we'll talk about the EAR. So the EAR is an export administration regulation, and this is sort of a national security act where this is used to regulate the export of goods and technologies for national security and foreign policy purposes. The best way I can describe this applies to commodities that are mainly in your computers and electronics, communication equipment, software and technology, sensors and lasers, anything with aerospace and propulsion. Really, it can be seen as anything that has a dual purpose, where you got the one main purpose for civilian use and the second for military use. If it has a dual purpose, more than likely you're going to have to file an EAR, which you will have to have a licensed broker file that on your behalf. It is very, very complicated, very, very complex. I have seen clients try and do it on their own, and the headache downstream, it opens up way more liability for your business than you want to be exposed to. So I would very much encourage you review your commodity, ask if it's EAR regulated, and if it is, find a trusted partner who you know can file it on your behalf. And then again, store those documentations because you want to keep that on record. Customs says that you need to keep that on record for 5 to 7 years. Most service providers will keep 5 to 7 year records for you. Okay. So if you are curious on if your commodity is EAR regulated, there's this easy to read flow chart that the government puts out. We have this in here. It's much more easy to read through the PowerPoint that we'll send out after the slideshow to everybody. But if you're curious, go through the flow chart, ask yourself the questions, and then just make note of if your commodity is subject to EAR or not. This flow chart is great. CBP came out with this a few years ago when they really started cracking down on it post 2020. So this is up to date. Nothing has changed since then. They don't think they plan to change it unless they add new commodities or things like that to it. But any questions, read through this. The Export Council is happy to help walk you through it. I myself, Rudy, we're all happy to help you walk through this. So, so now you know your commodity is not EAR regulated, and now you know the mode of transport. Now comes into the freight insurance and the declared value. So when you sell overseas, a lot of people are going to ask themselves, well, do I need freight insurance? And the question is that a risk you would like to take as a business owner when you sell overseas? If something happens to that cargo, are you going to be recouped to be able to then reimburse your customer for the sale, right? So securing cargo insurance really does protect your financial interest because, and again, it slightly varies per carrier, but carriers are not responsible for losses beyond their control. A lot of different carriers, so as you were choosing, again, an integrated carrier, freight forward, or whatever the case may be, everybody has different insurance claims or insurance limits of liability. So it's very careful to understand what that is. That's where freight insurance, third-party freight insurance, can come in handy and really protect yourself should there be a loss. And again, different agencies have different insurance rates. Most of them are pennies on the dollar. For example, There's a firm out there that we have as an underwriter that does 46 cents per $100. So for every $100 of declared value, it's 46 cents to insure that cargo. So you can insure $250,000 worth of cargo for I think $1,200, give or take, maybe less. So it's very much in your best interest. Um, Most third parties are good for 12 months. They cover all sorts of cargo, and it's easier for them to tell you what they don't cover versus what they do cover. However, some laws and some tariff restrictions will still limit the liability of that insurance rider. So again, as you are researching, as you're bidding out the business, as you are understanding the policies, it's always good to ask, what are the limits of liabilities based on particular tariffs? And if you have a country in mind that you are particularly going to sell to, it's good to say, this is my commodity, this is the declared value. Are there any limits on this? So terms of sale. This is the confusing part for a lot of exporters. What is going to be my Incoterm or my international commercial term? Because that what that is that is a term that is established by the International Chamber of Commerce. It may change every 10 years. We just changed in 2020. We won't change again until 2030, where it it is going to reflect who is responsible for what in terms of the transportation of the cargo. Where does your liability end and where does it begin? There are 11 different Incoterms. They're universal worldwide. Some people call certain Incoterms one thing, yet they mean another. So it's always good to, as you negotiate with your overseas clients, spell it out. This is where I would like my firm to take control, and this is where I want my liability to end. Spell it out. And then it wants to be reflected on the paperwork, such as FOB, such as DAP, such as CFR or CIF, things like that. But they're always abbreviated in these three terms. We've got a chart at the end to where you can reference. But the caveat, or not the caveat, the question that I'm always asked is, well, what's the best Incoterm? And there is no such thing as a best Incoterm. They each come with their own risk to both you and to your client. For example, X works means that somebody in Australia is going to take care of everything. All I have to do is shrink wrap the pallet and put it on my dock. What happens when the service provider that firm their customer in Australia chose, and it sits on my dock for 6 months because they can't find a service provider here in the US to come pick it up? That's a bad experience that they had from you. It all reflects on your reputation. Some customers want CIF, which is cost insurance freight, meaning you are going to send the freight to a named place. I'm going to use Australia, to a named place, let's say the Port of Melbourne, with insurance. And then the client in Australia is going to be responsible for customs clearance and delivery to their door. These are all things that will come back on your business of how do you want to do it. So there's no best Incoterm, but there are Incoterms that you want to consider of how can I make this the best experience for my client, protect my reputation, and minimize my liability. So labeling and packaging. So as you are packaging your product, the one thing you want to do is number one, protect the integrity of the product. If I'm sending glass vases to wholesale distributors in Australia, I want to make sure that it's packaged properly and can withstand the additional legs in transit and potentially any rough patches, such as turbulence with air, such as high waves with the seas. And then how is that going to affect your bottom line? And then, your packaging will also want to say, does it want to have your logo on it? Does it want to be a plain box? How is it going to help separate you in international markets? Some countries have packaging requirements. For example, if you send a pallet overseas or you place product on a pallet, that pallet needs to be heat treated, meaning it's got to be burned and fumigated for all types of bugs that can't go overseas. Most pallets, if you call a pallet manufacturer and say I need heat treated pallets, they've got plenty in stock. It's supposed to come with a little stamp, it's about that big on it, and that's what you have to send. If you're gonna send containers like LCL or consolidated cargo or full container cargo, you want to make sure that when a driver shows up with a container to load your dock, and take the extra 5 seconds, inspect it for holes, inspect it for rust, make sure that if rain comes or if it's windy on the high seas, that water's not going to get in that container and ruin your product, especially if you have electronics or just general car that can't get wet. Don't overstack. As you send internationally, understand that as you stack cargo, what is the integrity of the product? How high can you stack? If your pallet can't be stacked, then instead of using a 20-foot container, you may have to use a 40 or a 40 high cube. And that will affect your bottom line because a 40-foot and a 40 high cube cost more than a 20. So you can't pack as much cargo. Um, and then of course you've got use heat treated pallets with outer and the outer container if needed. So tools and resources. These are all the different resources we have and the tools. Please use these. These are great resources. I use them daily in my day-to-day job. As you grow internationally and begin taking international orders, these are going to be great resources to be able to just say, okay, how can I get off the ground and what don't I know? And then as you get more into the weeds of getting confident and begin fulfilling more international orders, please lean on the Arkansas Export Council to hold you hand in hand to make this job easy. Because as you expand internationally, your business can only continue to grow and open up multiple revenue streams for you and your business.
And
And
Colton, I want to let everyone know that we're going to have a full webinar on Incoterms in January, so be looking out for that.
okay, I didn't know the date, Rudy. That's fantastic. Like everybody, like Rudy said, there's going to be a way more in-depth Incoterm webinar in January. Miss Heidi will be sending that out in our newsletter. So be sure to be on the lookout for that and mark your calendars. I'll be sure to be in attendance myself. But prior to that, just so everybody has it, these are the current Incoterms for 2020. And like I said, they each change every 10 years. So these terms are good for another, technically 4 years, as we're only a few days out from 2026. But I believe that is it in the presentation. Just the next steps are how are you going to integrate and incorporate this into your international supply chain? You can figure out what your best mode of transportation is for your product or your promises to your customers. You have to identify your packaging needs. You've got your correct HTS code. And then last but not least, you want to learn the country of import rules. Every country is different. They don't operate as efficiently as the US. If you want to talk horror stories, I can tell you horror stories of people that have sent stuff overseas and they've not understood the rules. And sometimes that's just the joys of doing an international business is you're still going to be subject to other countries' rules as they try to import. So if anybody wants to know, happy to discuss, happy to swap war stories. Rudy, I'm sure me and you could sit around for a while and talk about our experiences, especially with certain countries.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to be very careful. But once you get the information that you need, and assuming that you're selling items that you're going to continue to sell, once you have that information, it's something that you can just use over and over again. But to Colton's point, certainly in terms of Incoterms, there's no one best way to do it because it depends on what your risk uh, uh, of parts are, whether you want to be have little risk or no risk at all, or whether you're not as risk averse as others. The whole thing with Incoterms is predicated on who is responsible for what, where, and when. At the end of the day, that's what you're looking at. And so that can vary due to your client, due to the product, due to the specific country that you're sending stuff to. And so it's something that you really have to pay attention to and to count on guys like Colton to help you with.
hmm Thank you for that, Rudy. Jonathan, I've got the chat pulled up, so I'll read through this. So, the first question we've got is, what is the best source of information on non-tariff barriers to U.S. products and services, such as importing U.S. food products into Australia, Canada, and Japan? So, um, Bill, I would assume, are we talking whether your commodity is allowed or just what you need to be aware of in terms of if you're I guess can you maybe elaborate that on a little more? I think I know what you mean, but I don't want to guess.
And to the second question that from Mickey, does freight insurance cover defective products? No, obviously there could be a an additional insurance that you might be able to get on that, but the freight insurance is just that freight.
So I'll elaborate a little bit more. So Mickey, freight insurance in to a degree can cover defective items. It's a little more gray than that. The answer is yes, but it's going to vary slightly per insurance underwriter, and then the type of commodity. Like if it is a defective product that, the first question is going to be, was it salvageable? Well, then if it's salvageable, then you may only get, like, let's say if the defective product is $100, you may only get reimbursed on the insurance side for 40% of that. I'm making that number up, but the answer is yes. It's just going to be a little more granular, such as the type of commodity, can it be refurbished? And what was I guess the question would be, what would have caused the defectiveness, right? So happy to have that conversation in more detail off the books, but long story short, yes, just need a little more information. And Bill, to answer your question, are they allowed? That's a, yeah, okay. So that's what I thought. So that again, you can research your product if it's allowed in a certain country. Some countries do put quote unquote tariffs on something. Like, for example, don't ask me why I know this. Hot sauce has like a 300% tariff in India. So I've got a client here in Louisiana that sells hot sauce. They don't sell in India because they can't compete. While it is allowed, the tariffs may be super high. The only thing that I know universally is that most developed countries will not allow commodities of certain origins. So your commodity may be allowed, but let's say you bought parts from one country and they are having a trade war with another, they may not allow your commodity whatsoever because it contains a certain piece. For example, I'm going to make this up. Um, let's say you are selling to, let's just say you're selling to India and you have a commodity where the leather may come from, I'm sorry, Pakistan. Well, about a year ago, Pakistan and Kuwait, we thought there was going to be an actual conflict. There was a very brief period where certain commodities with Kuwait origins, Pakistani origins, were not allowed to be imported into India via third party. The best resource I would say, if you cannot find it with, like, say, if the Export Council doesn't have resources overseas, I myself work with a network of agents that we could connect you with to say, Kazuhito is one of my contacts in Tokyo, and I know you said Japan. Um, if I have a client looking to export to Japan, I connect them with Kazuhito, and we have him do the legwork on his country because he's working in real time versus us going off of a Japanese government website or something that may be outdated with what we can find on the internet. So again, a good service provider or broker who's got contacts overseas would probably be your best bet to connect you with somebody overseas. That would be my best source if you can't find it online and it be up to date and reputable. I hope that answers your question.
All right.
It looks like that's it.
Yeah,
You're
man.
good, Colton.
Yeah, you are. You're a wealth of knowledge.
No questions are good questions. That's what I tell my daughter. So we'll see.
All right. Well, Rudy, do you have anything else before we?
I don't think I do, but once again, we're going to be having some other webinars coming up quickly. I think we have one next week on the 10th that Miss Heidi is going to provide some information on, as well as the one on I think it's the 21st of January, pertaining to the Incoterms. So, once again, stay tuned for additional information, and if we can be of service, we're happy to do that.
Yep. And I would like to again thank our sponsors, Arkansas Manufacturing Solutions and Arkansas Workforce Connections. But I also want to give special recognition to the team at Engaging Webinars today. They're the ones that kind of jazzed our webinar up for us a little bit today. I put the website and the contact information in on the chat if you want to have a conversation with this team. Customer service was fantastic, and we'll kind of play around with it and see where we go from here. But I just want to thank them personally for putting this on. So
Absolutely.
I think that's it. So if there's no other questions, thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday on our next webinar. So hope you all have a great, successful rest of your week.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Colton.